Kavoya. Ai tele itua wa utoi manatu pia mo molia Tausanga ilman mea chuchu puai Ole nu na mati le afai leo oni rosa e leo lai
Te mafaya mata utona mo oe olo uni manao Paulava se aro ote avatu omanatu ya oya te au Paulea ote ofo inatu aune mo
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our part 7 of our 8-part inner wellness series. What is your boundary? We'll be unpacking that today with Sala and Scarlett. But before we pass it over to them, I just really want to give a shout out to our sponsors who made this conversation possible. To the Office of Equity and Community Partnerships at King County Public Health, to Family Ways, program supporting pregnant persons, parenting families, and children's ages born till 5. All services are culturally relevant, participant-centered, and strengthened based on their pure community specialists. And to Waves, the validation, empowerment, and success for Asian Pacific Islanders at Shoreline Community College. And also to Voices of the South Pacific, the Pacific Island Broadcast, who we are using their platform on. So thank you for those who are here with us on Zoom, and then for those who are on the Facebook Live. So I think we're on YouTube too, but I don't know what that is. But with that, I'll just pass it over to Sala and Scarlett. Thanks.
Thank you, Celie. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I know it's been such a rainy and very, very rainy day here in Seattle, Washington. So if you're out there tuning in, or if you're driving and just kind of listening in, be careful on the roads. But so good to have you here if you're joining us this evening. This conversation tonight is actually one of my favorite conversations about boundaries, because it's so needed. And the more that Scarlett and I get to connect with our communities, the more we realize that the conversation around boundaries is very much needed. And I think it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you do. I think every person needs to have this conversation, or just needs to know about healthy boundaries, and how to even implement healthy boundaries, even understanding like what is a boundary. Because I know for me growing up, like this word was probably like non-existent until later on in my as a young adult, is when I came to kind of hear about boundaries. In our culture, in our community, it's almost like unheard of. So this conversation tonight, that Scarlett will be our main facilitator. She does an amazing job of just being able to identify what boundaries are, and even helps us to kind of like, okay, what does that even look like for you and I, right? So lots of good things in store tonight, but let me just introduce myself real quick. My name is Sala Afalava. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in the state of Washington. I work out of my own practice, also a student as well. And then in addition to all of that, I really enjoy partnering up with my sis, Scarlett, my colleague, that I'm able to do this work with her. And then at the same time, to be able to have Celie and our team, Una, and Voices of the South Pacific, and just be able to get these conversations out to everybody. So anyhow, that's me. I'm gonna, turn it over to Scarlett. If you have any questions throughout our conversation, Scarlett and I always encourage everyone that participates to like, hey, even if we're just, on this one slide, you don't have to wait till the end of the conversation to ask your question. We pause throughout each and every one of our slides, and we say, okay, any questions, any comments, any concerns, let us know. We are very open. We are very transparent in sharing the information. Scarlett and I are licensed professionals in our field. This work that we do, we're truly passionate about. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my amazing colleague, Scarlett, to kick us off on this amazing conversation tonight on boundaries. Let's go.
Oh, let's go. I appreciate you, Sala, so much. And again, I want to thank King County Public Health, Celie, Voices of the South Pacific, and Una for the work that they do, because it definitely is truly a team effort. So definitely want to give honor to you all always in providing this space so that Sala and I can do this for our community. My name is Scarlett Ekeroma. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and boundaries coach. I have been in this field for over a decade. And I work through my private practice, Elevate Healing. Just like Sala was saying, we're going to be talking about what's your boundary. And just like what she was saying, like, I didn't know anything about boundaries till like my late 20s. So I was like almost 30, and I was in grad school when I heard the word boundary in one of my graduate classes. I'm like, what's that? So it was an interesting, it was an interesting journey to do. So again, if you're on in the Zoom room, Facebook chat, whatever social media platform that you're on, if you have a questions, please put it in the comments, and then we will definitely answer them. If you have something to share, please don't hesitate to unmute yourselves, share in the chats, or if you're in the Zoom room, you can unmute yourself and share as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then Sala, let me know if you can see it.
Yep, and as Scarlett is getting that set up for us, if you are joining us on our Zoom, a couple of things in the chat. You'll see our our series number 7 in our what we call our event summary. So that is on the chat. If you want to go ahead and download that for yourself, like I said, we want to be able to equip you, give you all the tools you need. So everything that we're discussing tonight, it's in that event summary. That is something you can click on, take a screenshot photo of it, and just kind of reference, right? Because sometimes there can be a lot of information that's going to go on tonight, and as with all of our conversations. So if you're like not taking notes and maybe you're driving or something, this is something where you can just click on download and you'll have it, and you can always refer back to it. Okay, so that's in the event summary.
Awesome. Thanks, Sala, for that. So again, we're going to talk about what's your boundaries. So just this presentation that we're doing is actually a condensed version of what I did in my boundaries masterclass. And so just a quick story why I decided to become a boundaries coach was because, growing up, like I said, in my adulthood, and growing up and even in my adulthood, my boundaries, when I learned what they are, what I was learning is they were often violated. And what happened is when my boundaries were violated, I would often get physically ill. I would get nauseous, crying spells. I would even feel depressed. I would get headaches and body aches. And then I had like this huge wake up moment in about 2010, where I was on this path of discovering what are healthy boundaries and, not only what are they, but identify what the boundaries that I needed and how can I honor them. One of the biggest lessons that I learned about boundaries is that even though I have them, it didn't mean I was a bad person. It didn't mean that I was less loved. And it didn't mean whoever I set the boundary with that I loved them less either. So one of the first questions that I have before we get into the presentation is, when you think or hear of the word boundary, what ideas, thoughts, or feelings come up for you? I mean, not all at once.
Right. It's kind of quiet here tonight. It's like, look, I'm telling you, if you guys don't participate, Scarlett and I would be talking your ear off. And I know some of y'all probably like, yeah, we're okay with it. No, this is a community conversation, not a Scarlett and Sala conversation. Okay, so please tune in, unmute yourself, and engage with us tonight because we'd love that. So what comes up for me when I hear boundary is, I initially, like before I learned about boundaries, again, like it was definitely unheard of for me. Like it felt like it was like something that like a wall I had to put up, right? So for me, when I first, before I learned about boundaries, just going off of it, I would think it's like a wall, right? Like it's a wall that I'm putting between me and someone else, and I'm blocking them off, like just going off of that. So that was me before learning in depth about what boundary is. So I think right now, and you'll hear more my thoughts and Scarlett's thoughts on it. Right now, I look at this picture and I always love pointing out how it's like, it's kind of like all of these things that are maybe coming towards you. And I love how like that person that's right there in the picture is kind of putting up, I would say this person putting up the hand, he's kind of like implementing his boundary, which is like, nope, right? So that's what, I'm not going to share any more thoughts. I want to share later on, but I just want to reflect on this beautiful picture because it's like, nope, that's my boundary.
Sure.
Celie, did you have anything?
Yeah, no, just like the, technical definitions or something ends and like another thing begins, right?
Yeah.
So like putting up like that guy, just a roadblock that, okay, this is my limitation. I'm going to stop
Right.
here. But in island culture, the boundaries are loose. You know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
you try to have boundaries with your family, but it's your family, so you just let them on in.
Yeah, and I love that you said it because we'll definitely talk about that for sure. And so, does anybody else want to add anything? And then Sala, let me know if in the chat there's anything, and Celia in the chats as well. So I think so. I'll say very, very similar to Sala. Like when I heard of the word boundary, my big thing was like, what is that? And so I just remember feeling like so confused because I had never heard of that word before. And it was like, because when you find out whatever the definition is, like whatever you look up, and it's just like, I don't think we got that.
Like we ain't got that at all.
It was very, very awkward, and it
Yeah.
was very awkward because just like you were saying, Sala, it was just like when people first learn about boundaries, they just think of wall, and we'll go into
Right.
why.
Exactly. So I want to share something Emma wrote in the chat. She says, learning that it's okay to love people from afar because sometimes they cause harm to us. So it's okay to love from a distance. Absolutely.
Absolutely love that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm that love from a distance. Woo.
Ooh, yes, that's a skill. That's a skill.
Yeah, for sure. because and just so everyone's aware, I know all of the topics that Sala and I talk about definitely pushes the challenges is very challenging for our community.
Mhm.
And we do these conversations because again, we see our people in our private offices talking about
Mhm.
these things. And so one of the big things with each class, what we do is we want to increase everyone's self-awareness
Yeah.
because there is it lacks within our community, and that's why they come and see
Mhm.
us and how we can help increase that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like, again, adding on to what Scarlett said about the clients that we see in our practice, like all of these different community conversations that we're having, are birthed out of Scarlett and I's combined experience of working with our community people, right? And everything that we're seeing, we're like, okay, that's a theme. That's a theme. Okay. And then so if more than 5 people are experiencing this and me and Scarlett are looking at it and we're like, oh yeah, that's a theme. More than 10 people are experiencing this exact same thing that we are seeing, like, okay, that's another theme. So then for us, it's having to like identify all of these common themes that everyone in our community seems to be, I think in a smaller scale is experiencing. We're like, let's talk about these things, right? Because it's causing a lot of clinical significant distress for people. And so we want to be able to have a conversation so that you can be aware. Because a lot of time, like how we were in our experience before, like we weren't aware of what boundaries are. And well, you'll hear our stories of just how that kind of led us, in difficult situations. So we want to be able to share that.
For sure, and so again, Stella, thanks for that. So quickly, this is our agenda for tonight. So we're gonna watch a short video on boundaries, and it's a quick 2-minute video, and then we're gonna talk about just healthy boundaries, just what they are. Again, this is just a soft introduction to what boundaries are. It is not the full extent of what boundaries are. So we're gonna talk about the what and the why. As one of my favorite slides is we always talk about culture, how culture and guilt actually play in it. Pretty significant role in when it comes to boundary, why it's hard to set one. And as Sal and I always do, we want to give you all actionable steps and tips that you can start using immediately once this class is done. And then we're just gonna chat. I mean, we always chat throughout, and then that's it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and Sala, can you see the video? Awesome. All right.
Today we're talking about personal boundaries, the invisible lines that define the edges of who we are. Personal boundaries help us navigate in the world. Knowing and managing where we end and the other person begins is essential to living a satisfying and healthy life. But when our boundaries are crossed, it can make us feel stressed, confused, and anxious. And as with most things to do with our brains, boundaries aren't one size fits all. We each set our own boundaries to allow some people to come close or to keep others at a distance. People can violate your boundaries in a number of ways. When someone does this, it's a big red flag. For example, if someone makes you feel like you don't have the right to your own individual thoughts and feelings, big red flag. Have you ever been told that you're responsible for someone else's bad behavior, violence, or abuse? A huge red flag. Or if someone always expects you to return texts or calls immediately, that's another red flag. Learning to manage our own boundaries is a necessary step in learning to love ourselves and others. When you set a boundary and the people in your life respect it, that's a huge sign that this is the type of person you want in your life. Like when someone asks your permission and doesn't force you into an uncomfortable situation, or when someone allows you to disagree with them without retaliation, or when you're allowed to say no to anything, including sex, drugs, parties, even requests for your time. When you're able to identify red and green flags, it allows you to strategically share your life with those around you. By strategic sharing, we mean that in every situation, you decide who has access to your body, mind, and personal information. With time and practice, you'll get better at being able to identify the red and green flags that define your personal boundaries. Through that process, you'll gain more trust in yourself and will be able to strategically share more of your life with the people around you that you know you can trust.
Any questions, any comments? Anybody want to share anything? And Sala, if you want to add anything as well.
Yeah, I really like that video. I like that this idea of strategic change, or sorry, strategic sharing. I really like that idea because again, like this is what we talk about anyways in our boundaries conversation, but it's just like a another name that they're calling it, strategic sharing, which I absolutely like. And it was saying that, like, this is when you get to decide who has access to what in your life, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's powerful. Like, I hear that and I think that's very empowering, to be able to, like, like I get to decide, because sometimes, like, I know when I share with my clients about boundaries and how to implement, and because of, like, it's always going to be really difficult to implement boundaries with family members, right? Like what Celie was sharing, especially, like, then you put on top of that, if you're like a Pacific Islander or Samoan, and it's like, man, boundaries are out the door, but then you have to think about, like, well, what is this costing you and your peace of mind?
Absolutely.
Right? So I like the idea of strategic sharing, because then it's like, you get to decide, even in a cultural setting, even in our cultural background, knowing that, like, you have the power to be able to decide who has access to what in your life, to what information. It can be to what information in your life. It can be about what, what parts of your life that they can know about. But I think for me, just hearing that feels very empowering. And then I think, like, this is absolutely excellent in the sense that, like, even when we apply it to our culture, like, it can be an empowering piece of information. So that really kind of stood out for me about this video.
Love that. Yeah, I think that's the thing about with boundaries. When people think they have a boundary, that they think that it has to stay the same,
Mhm.
and not really knowing that you can adjust it as needed. And so we'll definitely talk about that more. And that's why I love, like, the illustration of what that video was, when the brain got better at setting a boundary and they drew a new line, erased the old line.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that was the thing that I love about when we talk about boundaries, that it never has to stay the same. It applies
Right.
currently is going on, and you get to adjust it as needed as time goes on, or you feel the situation changes. So
Yeah.
yeah. Any questions? Anybody want to share anything? Any comments? Celia, are we good in Facebook or any other platforms?
Nope, we're good in the Zoom. No comments.
Yeah, we're
Cool.
good here too.
Awesome.
Today we're talking
All right. Let's talk about boundaries even more. So boundaries, what are they? So this is a definition that I loved by Anne Catherine, where her book was called Where You End and I Begin. So healthy boundaries protect without isolating, contain without imprisoning, and preserve identity while permitting external connections. So we're going to let me break that down for you, because I know that's a lot to take in. So the first part, where it says boundaries helps protect without isolating, what that means in the interpretation that I have, is it helps protect you not only internally, what's going on inside your thoughts and feelings, and externally your physical space, and keeps you connected to others. So again, because we have this idea, sometimes boundaries is that no one's allowed to come in, and that's not true. The second part is contains without imprisoning, meaning you get to have options, you get to make choices for your life, and you give yourself permission to do so. I think one of the biggest challenging things when I see especially our Pacific Island, my Pacific Island clients, is the notion of self-permission. They really have a hard time giving themselves self-permission, because they're always used to having someone make a decision for them. So again, when they come to our office, Michelle and I are talking about self-awareness, how we can continue to self-empower whoever's in front of us. And then the last part is preserve identity while permitting external connections, meaning not giving up who you are to make another person comfortable, and still staying connected with them. So any comments, any questions? Solid, you want to add anything?
Just want to share, I know like a lot of times when I get my clients into, and we're doing a lot of boundary work, the impression that they always get is, like with boundaries is like they're gonna cut someone off. Like when I suggest or make the suggestion of like implementing a boundary there, they immediately, like what they hear is, I'm not gonna see this person anymore. Like this is it. Like, oh, burn bridge, like cut them off, like, and so then they get all worried and they get, because I'm like, well, do you want to cut this person off like from your life and don't want to see them anymore? And they're like, no. I was like, then no, you're not going to cut them off. But like, what are you okay in allowing this person, this family member, to do, or that you're okay with? Like, as long as you're okay with, it's within your boundaries. I think what we come down to is when we keep doing things for other people that we are not okay with, and we just keep doing it, right? So that's why like that piece of like it protects you, like healthy boundaries is it protects you, but it doesn't mean that it's going to cut you off or isolate you from everyone, because now you have to put a boundary down or something like that. But like, no, that is not what boundary is, or what a healthy boundary is. Like it's just like, what are you okay with sharing with your mom, right? What are you not okay with sharing with her? What are you okay when your mom talks to you about? Like if I remember having a client when, talking to mom about everything, right? Just every single thing. And then she would be mad because then mom is just kind of like, just, well, you shouldn't do that, do this, and that's why you did this. And then she wasn't happy with mom's response, right? And so I said, well, she's like, I don't like it when she tells me, and it's like, well, what's a boundary that you can implement? What are you okay with sharing with her? It doesn't mean that you have to completely not share anything with mom, but what are you okay with sharing with her that that whatever she responds to, like, you can't control that, right? So having to like really break those things down and explain to clients or explain to people, like, doesn't mean you have to completely not share anything with mom, but it's like, if you don't want to share with mom about your intimate, moments, because of her feedback, then what are you okay with sharing with her, right? Because she's going to provide a feedback. She's going to say something. She's going to respond the way she always does. You can't control that. But what is a boundary that you can put down there when it comes to those conversations? So it's not like you're completely cutting mom off. Like, no, I know that your relationship with your mom is important to you. I know you value those things, but you can still have that relationship and still have this healthy boundary. Because I think a lot of the times too, like people feel like when they put down a boundary, then that person is out of their life or something. Like it's a wall. Like now you can't talk to me anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the way that we describe boundaries is they are gates. They're not
Mhm.
walls. They are gates, and you can allow someone who you want in your
Yeah.
gate. Doesn't mean you keep them out. And so it's very important, and with that because like what Sala
Mhm.
was saying, and we've talked about in our previous classes before, like when they're talking about strategic sharing, it's like you have to go to your emotionally safe person. And
Mhm.
sometimes, as we've said it, it's not our family. Sometimes
Yeah.
it is family, and that is okay, because it's about and that's a boundary, how you can protect yourself, because sometimes, unfortunately, some people just want to hear the bad things, but what's going on with you. So, because there goes into this comparison, and then they go,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, sometimes whoever we tell does gossip about us.
Right.
Let me tell you about such and such. And so then right then and there, a boundary is violated, and that's not
Right.
okay.
Mhm.
Any questions, any comments before we go forward? Just want to make sure we give space for that. Good. Okay. All right. So let's talk about why they're important. Um, Before we do that, my question to you all is, what are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated?
It's quiet tonight. It's too quiet, Scars. Too quiet tonight, right? Look, we finna
I
play
mean,
some songs and like and like have the songs in the background and like look, all right, let's talk about boundaries, okay? Sorry, Scarlett, repeat your question again.
yeah, so the question is, what are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated? And I know this conversation is always going to be a little bit quiet because it's making people reflect on inner, because a lot of, especially with our Pacific Island community, we're always thinking outer. What is, how's
Mhm.
everyone else doing rather than what's going on with us? So all of these questions are record. It's just
Mhm.
like, tell me what's going on with you, not what's going on with the family or with the
Mhm.
system or the community you're a part of. So I it is okay if you're quiet, but because we still gonna do this. Okay. See,
Right?
yep. Go ahead,
We
Celie.
have Emma in the chat that said hurt and not validated.
Oof. Yeah. Mhm.
Hmm. Good one. Thanks,
Mhm.
Emma.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, Sarah and Scarlett. Yeah, this is a very important topic also, but the healthy boundaries. What is the most important thing that make a person to be aware? What is the healthy boundaries? Do you know, like you, everybody can do different things, you know, every day in their life and the life, different lifestyle. But what is something that makes a person aware that I'm on a healthy avenue? Do you know?
Well, it really just depends. Like it depends on what they're seeking. And so, for example, if they're seeking less tension with family members, and it's just like more, that's just an example just off the top of my head. And it's just like, okay, what is it about this tension that is bothering me, not bothering them? And so it's thinking about like, all right, I know if they say this to me, how does that affect me? And however it affects you, in particular, if it affects you negatively, it's like, what are the words I need to say instead of allowing that to continue to happen? So for example, if I have said to family members, when we have a disagreement, I said, okay, we can disagree, but if you yell, I'm going to leave because it's not a conversation anymore. So that's a communication boundary that I have. So does that help, Auntie Sylvia?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think you're very right. Just something that I thought about, you know, like many years ago, you know, I learned that that was like some workshop. They were saying, you know, like, you know, even though if it's a meeting or, you know, like some kind of a town hall meeting or like a group of people, like church, you know, if you know, like if you're right, but you know which one is more damaging, you know, for you to fight for your right, or you rather just like what you're saying, you know, if you yelled, you know, you rather just leave, you know, instead of fighting back, you know, because you wanted to know the boundaries, you know, like toward to the end, which one is more damaging. So do you rather just try to shout out, you know, for your right, or you rather just be just like maybe, oh, because that person don't really know what I'm trying to say. So it's best to kind of leave it that way than me trying to very persistent, you know, on trying to fight my point, you know, and it's more damaging, you know, it's causing more damage than good.
Because usually, so here's the thing about when it comes to when somebody starts to yell and wants to be loud, at that point, that person no longer is listening effectively. They want to win the argument. And so you have to decide, just like you said, Auntie, but what is actually best for you? And so it's just like, do I want to address it now? Or can I address it later when that person is more calm so that there can be a conversation, then we can talk about solutions? Because that's what ends up happening a lot of times when people get to that whole let's just say, like, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is like when you're really heated. I always tell people, if you feel like you yourself are about to get to a 5 because you're going to be upset, then we probably have to take a break from the conversation and revisit it, because once we get past that, there's no more thinking about like, I'm going to hear you, you're going to hear me, we're going to come up with solutions, because now at that point we're talking about who's going to win the argument because you're not hearing me. Is that helpful?
I know I see a lot of some of our people in the community and Tongan people. So I would just say like one little second, you know. Ko e poini ko whai kai tok ai tala noa. Ko e ha ai tau mua ko e te whanonga. Ka pau o ki aha whataha anga pe ko whataha anga ka kai pe ko e hape te whakakau kau ko e hai mea ko te ngo ikusai ka kita. O ksai ange ha te wheng ke te whakatori a loto tako tau pe ka te si I tau ki ta moe whaingata. Thank you so much. That is a very important topic, Tina, of knowing your boundaries, healthy boundaries. Thank you.
Scarlett, just want to read something from the chat here. So Mohammed says, to me, I think I feel depressed and angry because I used to keep silent when this happens, then also disappointed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mohammed. One of the things that happens, especially across people of color communities, is we often suffer in silence quite often. So, Celie, did you want to add something before I move forward?
Oh yeah, no. I think to your question, it was maybe I need new boundaries. Like those boundaries didn't work for that
Yeah.
person. And
Yeah.
then I want to read something my niece wrote on Facebook Live. It's her boundaries were, F around and find out when you cross them. So that's a very typical Samoan answer. But shout out to Caitlin for that one.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's just like, and if we feel, I always say, like, when it comes to boundaries, if we feel like we have to get to the point of violence, that means something wasn't initially addressed. And so we have to, whenever that boundary is initially violated, we have to address it with immediacy, and not wait. Because and that's the thing. I used to wait, and I've definitely been where your niece has been, and it's not a great place to be in, to do that consistently. And that's why we teach when we we talk about like identifying your feelings, knowing what they are, actually what's underneath your anger, let's navigate these cultural stigmas, because those all play a role in how we present ourselves or how we interact in the world with other communities. And so it's very imperative, like I said, to talk about, again, what's that root of what's going on, and not let it continue happen over and over.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's the great response as well, because like it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to get to the point, and that's the whole idea behind introducing boundaries and learning about healthy boundaries, because like Scarlett said, it doesn't have to get to the point where this person is going to find out. I think when it gets to the point when this person finds out, it's already too late at that point, right? For that person, and probably for you, because then it's like, look, we about to throw down, okay? It's already too late at this point. I can't be implementing anything at this point. But what Scarlett is saying is, it doesn't have to get to that point where, like we're finding out like how to respond to this already, right? Totally get it. But with the healthy boundaries, like this is what it is. It's identifying beforehand what you are okay with, what you are not okay with, right? Because that's what boundaries is. It's like what Celia even said earlier. It's, knowing when something stops and when something starts, right? So knowing like where those two things are, it's like, okay, I'm going to try and, before people even get to my backyard, there's a fence right there. So that's the boundary line between me and my neighbor, right? So, such a great point of discussion that I know we'll continue to talk more about throughout this. Any more comments? Oh, another comment from Mohammed. He says, growing up in a family of 12 people, nothing to be said about boundaries. Oh, absolutely. This is part of the culture. I agree. Yes, I agree. Similar experience as well, Mohammed. Thank you for sharing.
And Auntie Sylvia, go ahead. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce, for those people that are in, if you have any question, feel free to write it, on the comments box or the chat box, and then we'll be able to relay the question, Kapau ka mo fehui, mo fa mole mole po tohi pe, we'll be more than happy to share it, with our facilitator. This is an important topic, about know your boundaries or healthy boundaries. Thank you.
Awesome. For that. So, great responses. And so, you know, I think when it comes to it, like I think a lot of times what I've seen across, when and particularly Pacific Islanders, when they see me, they don't see that it's important to have healthy boundaries because they're always taught to put family first,
Mhm.
community first, the event first, always at the expense of you. And so this is why it's important because um, having a healthy boundary creates a healthy relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
Everything, again, like Sal and I were talking about, is to truly increase self-awareness. Because when you're able to create an intentional relationship with yourself, this actually helps increase intentionality with others. Because again, like what we were talking about just a little bit ago, we often suffer in silence because we just don't know what a healthy boundary is. Again, healthy boundaries are a protector for you
Mhm.
so that everything doesn't have to keep coming at a cost of you. Then next, you understand, share, and identify your likes, needs, and wants. When across the board, when I ask clients, what do you like? What do you need? What do you want? They often have challenges because, again, they're always taught to do for others before you do for yourself. One of the big things in one of our early community conversations, when Sala did navigating cultural stigmas in mental health, one of the things that I talked about is like, if you actually took care of yourself first, you are actually better to the community, to the family, and whatever contact circle you are a part of. Because again, we often and frequently give at a deficit. Next, it teaches people how you like to be treated. And it makes it an emotional safe space, one where you can discuss challenges and not feel like the relationship is going to end. And oftentimes, if you set a boundary and somebody keeps violating it, you get to decide what you want to do. Sometimes it's ending it. Sometimes it's keeping them in this certain area of your life. Sometimes it's okay, do I want to give them another chance? That's the thing about boundaries. You get to decide what you want to do. I always tell my clients that whatever boundary that you set, however someone reacts to your boundary, that is information for you. And you get to decide what you want to do. There are various options that you can do. And I always talk with my clients about what you want to do. Just like Sala was saying earlier, it's just like when you was talking about the mom, it's just like, okay, I still want my mom a part of my life, but what's the boundary I need to set with her? Because what I'm doing is currently not working. Because because your mom's not feeling violated, you are. So again, what's the boundary that you need to set with that? And then lastly is you practice using your voice to share your needs. That's the effects of boundaries. It really brings your voice to the forefront. And it's important. I'm always big on bringing our voice to the forefront. And when I'm talking about bringing it to the forefront, it's not being disrespectful. It's like, how do I say what I need in a respectful tone, in a respectful manner? So for example, if a boundary of mine was violated, I'd be like, hey, I said that bothers me. Could we do it differently? Could you say that differently? So instead of my old ways were not great. Okay. And so it's just really learning again, what are my likes and needs and wants? Because then I was able to share that, because if I didn't know what they were, I wouldn't be able to share it. Any comments, questions, Sala, add anything if you would like as well.
Yeah, I think this slide really would be, I think this is what, because I remember bits of what Auntie Sylvia was asking earlier, right? She said something about like what makes people aware that they are in like that healthy avenue of boundary. It's right here. This is how you can be aware of that, right? So that means like if you're able to understand yourself, to share and identify what you like, what you need, and what you want, then you are within that healthy avenue of what a healthy boundary is, right? Because that's being in that healthy boundary avenue that you were asking about. This is you being able to show people, teach people how you want to be treated, pretty much. And then you are able to also, like what Scarlett points out over here, like practice using your voice to share your needs. So if you're in a relationship where you feel like, you know, you just cannot even verbalize how you feel about the relationship, or how or even like your own 2 cents about something, right? And if you feel like, you know, everything that this person is doing is just creating a lot of chaos, conflict, and, you know, just creating a lot of like difficulties for you, then that means you are not okay with something. And then that can be like a way that you're able to identify that a boundary of yours can be violated or is being violated. Another way to like look at the healthy boundaries, or to find that awareness of what a healthy boundary is, or even understand in depth like where you can start with healthy boundaries, is think about your values. What are the things that are important to you? And then go from there. So usually when I do a lot of boundary work with my clients as well, is we always tend to start from a place of values. And a lot of the times I find that people are not really sure what it is that they value. Like they don't know what they like. They don't know what they want. They don't know, you know, what it is, because a lot of times, sometimes they are very often caught up in someone else's values. They're more often caught up in what other people want, what other people need, at the cost of their own. So a lot of the work that we do before even like, you know, leading up to boundary, is being able to help people identify what their values are. Because you'd be surprised, like even if you were to, you know, everyone here tonight, if you were to be like, well, what are my values? Matter of fact, when was the last time you even thought about what your values are? And have you taken the time to kind of really reflect on that and write that down and really think into that? Because you'll notice that every time you feel slighted when it comes to something, it's usually because that list of values you have, the things that you think is important to you, it's usually because someone has stepped into that, or has like, you know, is going against some of those things on your list, that you realize like, oh, okay, like I'm not okay with that because this is what's important to you.
It's a boundary violation that happened.
Mhm.
Step onto that. And to add on to what Sala was saying, you know, when we think about what's the value, because one of the key questions I always start with my clients, and I always ask them, can you tell me who you are without saying what you do? Not having the title of mom, wife, husband, whatever your career is. And that's always a challenge, because that's a good place to where you can start identifying again what your needs, self-awareness, and in addition to identifying your values. So these are very, very good. This is like the work we enjoy doing, and this is why we find it important to share it with our community, because that's why Sala and I are doing these classes, because oftentimes you don't get this information unless you come see somebody like Sala and I in an office. And so these are truly the things that we talk about consistently and frequently with every client that we see. So any comments, any questions before we go forward?
Yes, I have a question. Uh, Thank you for this great opportunity. My question is, you know, like, can you give us an example, you know, teaching people how would you like to be treated? I know that I know about myself, I'm like a people pleaser. You know, sometimes I follow people to please them, you know, but not stand strong, you know. Can you, and then sometimes I know about exactly what you're saying, you know, how can you maybe teach people how would you like to be treated? Thank you.
So great question. So one of the things that I would say is we have to identify the reason or reasons why we are a people pleaser. Because one of the big things that we talk about is we have to know the reasons why we do something, so that if it happens again, it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing that thing again. Let me not do that, whatever that is. So if we don't know the reason why we're people pleasing, it just sets you up to continue to do it over and over and over again. And so if you're people pleasing because of that's what you were taught, then it's just like, okay, that's what I was taught. I don't want to do that anymore. Let's sit and think about what actually do I want to do. And so it takes a minute. Because we're talking about undoing things that we have learned as that, because it's a part of us. So I definitely was a people pleaser. So one of the things I had to learn to do and be okay with was saying no to something. And that was also saying, for example, how I particularly started out was like, okay, I see this family member calling. I don't feel like talking. I'm not going to answer the phone. And I had to, and it was uncomfortable. It was awkward because they were always used to me answering the phone. So when I was able to sit and talk with that family member, and they're like, hey, you didn't answer the phone. And I had to tell them, I said, you know what? There will be some times that I'm not going to answer the phone, and I need you to be okay with that. They were like, oh, okay. For me, I was at that because I was like, oh my God, they're gonna be so mad at me. And they weren't, because I let them know what I needed, and they were able to honor that.
So
So
it's
it,
not like a rudeness, a disrespect, like in case maybe somebody it's on an urgent need, I'm just trying to get some, like some info to put it on my hand, and put it on my brain, because sometimes, like it's hard for me to say no, and sometimes you feel like when the people are taking advantage, but it's not their fault, it's me, but then when you said, you don't want to answer the phone, but then I thought, what about if this person here is in a big need, or maybe in trouble, or on the
yeah.
road, or could be wanting to go to the hospital, like those things like that.
Well, and that's the thing. Let's not create that. Let's
Yeah.
actually have them leave a message or a text actually saying what they need.
Right.
So used to being that person in need, that rescuer, where it's just like, actually, they may have just wanted to say hi.
Right.
And some of the things that they probably wanted can be actually be answered in the text. Because one of the things you can do, you can say, Auntie Sylvia, I'm not available to talk. Can you send me a text of what you need? Which still
Right.
answers that question of what you need. So it's really setting you up for, and then like you get to decide whatever they text. If they do decide to text, you get to decide what you want to do. Do I want to answer this now? Do I want to answer this later? Do I have the space to give what they need at this moment? So those are all things you can sit with. It just doesn't have to be with immediacy. You
Right.
get to decide. And that's the thing we'll talk about later, where it's just like, it's important for you to think about, if somebody, I'll just say it this way, if somebody gets mad at you for setting a boundary, that is information for you. That is true. And like I said, it's just like, and we'll talk about this in our next slide, how guilt actually plays a role in and impacts our boundaries, and why people often can take advantage of us. But great question. Great question. Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions before
Thank
we
you so
proceed?
much.
Yes, from Vicky. She says boundaries between friends and work gets challenging sometimes. Oh, absolutely. I helped someone get a job, and sorry, let me remove this. And I had to fire her. It hurt our friendship. Oh, yes, that's tough, Vicky.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think, and to add, I'll say this, the job I was working at was looking for somebody, and so I told my friend about the open position. What I ended up telling my friend was, this is the boundary that I set with her before. I said, listen, when I'm at work, it is work mode. I am not your friend. I got to get the job done, because this job helps pay for my living expenses. And she actually ended up getting fired, but that didn't deter our relationship, because she already knew going in that I was like, I'm not your friend. I got work to do. I'm a wholly different person at work versus outside of work. So if you're not okay with that, don't apply for the job. And so she ended up applying for the job. She got it. I think she only worked there for like a month, and then she ended up getting fired. So it's hard, and it's just like, you gotta it's just unfortunate because I wouldn't say that that was on you, Vicky. I think that was more on the friend, because for a friendship to end because she got fired or you had to fire her, it's there's this what's the word? There's this loyalty that she thought you should have had to her, but not knowing she wasn't, that you were very about your business and doing the job. And she was like, no, you're supposed to be loyal to me regardless. And I'm like, not at this, not you can't. I always tell people, don't get in the way of me and my money, regardless. Because again, this is my work, this is my living expenses, this is how I do what I do. So I can say, Vicky, I don't think it had nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the said friend. Any comments, any further comments or questions? Good conversation though. I love this.
Yeah, so good. I want to add on to what Auntie Sylvia was sharing too. By the way, thanks for being transparent and saying like, you are a people pleaser individual. But I wanted to point out too, Sylvia, that if pleasing people is a part of your value system, because like people tend to have that label sometimes in a negative way, and it's like, oh, you just a people pleaser. But sometimes it, like, what I see people pleasing is kind of like, I really value making other people happy, right? So if that's sort of part of your value and you are okay with it and it's not causing you any distress, it is not giving you anxiety, then by all means, like, that is okay. That means you making this person happy is within your boundary, right? But if it gets to the point where you making someone happy tends to be almost like a chore, or now it's becoming like, I feel obligated, right? So now it's starting to cause you some kind of distress and anxiety and all kinds of strain, right? So that's when those are some of the signs, Sylvia, to where you can be like, oh, okay, like now I'm not okay with it, so now it's in violation of my boundary, right? So but if you are, because for some people, like, I like it when, like, I'm doing things for other people and I know that it makes them happy, it satisfies them, like I'm sharing the work, something like that. So it's part of my value system as well. So so that's what I'm trying to point out as well, right? Is if you are doing that and you are not at all distressed by it, you are not at all like anxious about it, or have any kind of conflict, or feel like it's obligation, then that means it's within your value, it's within your boundaries. So that means it's okay. But the minute that you do something and it doesn't, and you start to feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm dreading it, I'm dreading doing this for this person, right? So then that means now your boundary is violated.
For sure.
So I just
Thank
wanted
you so-
to
yeah,
kind of
thank you so much, Sarah.
clarify that.
And Scarlett, yeah, thank you for
Right.
enlightening that and make me more aware of that. Sometimes it's because it's coming from our cultural
Yeah, for
values.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we
You
need
feel
to change.
obligated to take care of others sometime,
Yeah, I
and
think
not
maybe,
yourself.
yeah, maybe think about like how we want to reframe that instead of people pleasing. You
Yes.
know, it's just because I enjoy helping people, and just like Sala,
Yeah.
once it gets to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, I think you're using me,
Right. Yeah.
then like I have
Mhm.
to truly implement and
Yes.
push the boundary.
Mhm.
So
Very true. I feel like sometimes, that I am, like I feel very fulfilling and very rewarding, to help someone.
Yeah.
But then other than that, there could be, and some people show appreciation, but then another thing, like on everybody are different, you feel like these people, like you, like you, are you able to treat me like the way how I treated you?
Mhm.
Yeah, and then you started to kind of worn out,
yeah,
Yeah.
and when that happens, it's just like one of the things I know about just us in general is like especially for women, we have like a gut feeling. And I always tell like the people, especially the women I work with, I said, whatever your gut feeling is, like pay attention to that. It's trying to tell you something, and it's just like something's not sitting right with you. So it's just like what needs to be addressed. And so we often feel that, and it's just like, all right, this person I can tell only comes to me when they need something. They're not actually checking in on me. They're not actually want to know how I'm doing. What do I want to do with that person or that family or that community, whatever it is. So great conversation. So let's talk about culture, culture and guilt. So the question is, how does culture and your upbringing impact your boundaries? Let the floodgates open. So please, any comments, please share them as well. And I'm gonna be quiet, and then Salah, I'm gonna let you, if there's any comments or anybody have, and let us know too as well in the Facebook chat. So the question is, how does culture and your upbringing impact your boundaries?
You got something on the chat, Celie? Nothing over here
No,
on my end.
nothing on the chat, just my own personal opinion. No, just like Muhammad Akmush said, coming from a big family, right? So he had a family of 12. I only had 4 siblings, or 3, including myself. But when you're around a big family, you don't really have boundaries, or don't know what boundaries are, or you look at it as more of a Western ideal, right? Just
Yeah.
you, a lot of guys play. We play around too much. And then someone might say, "Man, stop that! I'm exercising my boundaries." Man, you better get out of here with that boundary crap. What are we, whitewashed? You know what I'm saying? So that's why I think about it from a cultural perspective. But
yeah, I think when it comes to cultural context, and especially family, and what you're referring to, you and Muhammad are referring to, is like we actually do have boundaries in the family because, for example, is we know if we didn't clean up, we would get in trouble. That's a boundary. A lot of what, in particularly this conversation we're talking about, is personal boundaries, which is not what we're taught. Because again, it's best for what's best for the family, because it's the family that has to move as a unit. And oftentimes, the unfortunate thing, what happens is like when we're outside of that family unit, we don't know how to function effectively by ourselves. I can't tell you how many family members I've known who have gone to college because they're so used to the family system and don't finish because they missed home, they missed the family, and then they come back home and do nothing. And it's just like, wow. And it always, for me, baffled me, because I'm like, the family's not going anywhere. You can come back, but just make sure you do what you need to do. But if you're not taught to be self-sufficient, self-aware, how to actually implement anything personally to you, you don't know how to function, what's best for the unit, period.
Yeah.
That help?
Sorry, go ahead, sis.
No, I was gonna say, does that help, Celie?
Oh yeah. No, that makes sense. It's just again, like you're saying, being self-aware.
Yeah.
I think Muhammad has
boundaries specifically. I know like people in our culture, like they keep the relation like for like a really long time with boundaries like violated in multiple ways until like there's a point where they end the relationship like suddenly, and there's no way that they can come back to that relationship because like the middle ground of like talking about every time like my boundaries is violated is not part of the culture. It's either you keep patient and you stay like in the relationship and complement other like by just handling it internally, but then there comes a time where like people like suddenly like no more, like ending the relationship immediately, and this is like, as you said, like healthy relationship relies on healthy boundaries, I believe. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I think the unfortunate thing, what happens in across the board, is like we're truly not taught how to do solutions. not how to talk to think about like repair. We're always talking about what hurt, which is like that good part. We need to address that, but it's just like, all right, how do I not do that anymore? So that's not, that's definitely something that, Sal and I teach with our clients is like, how do we actually do repair and how do we actually talk about the solutions and not just staying focused on you hurt me, you did this, you did that. I don't like this, I don't like that. Okay, I did that. Tell me what needs to be, what you need moving forward. So I don't do that again. So that's
Yeah.
that a lot oftentimes is missing. So thanks,
Yeah.
Mohammed. I appreciate you sharing that.
We have Vicky in the chat saying our elders, we zip the lip, but we have to do our way, which it works for me.
Yeah.
With that.
I love talking to our elders and because they often aren't taught the things that we like what we know now. So when Sal and I had the opportunity to speak to our elders and for them to share, because one of the things I remember one of them saying, or a couple of them saying, was like they thanked us for coming to teach them because they just didn't know. So and that's the thing with our elders that I always hold a dear place for them because there's a lack of information that they just didn't get growing up.
Mhm. They were just going off of what they knew, right? I wanted to add real quick about just with what Celie said with the kind of joking around and in that context and like you're trying to implement your boundaries. Like one thing you got to understand when implementing boundaries is it's not a one-time thing. I'm going to tell you like, hey, stop joking around, like I'm implementing my boundaries, I don't like it when you joke like that. You can't just like implement that boundary one time, right? It's a thing that you have to constantly be able to implement, right? Because let's say for example, like before, like it's gotten to the point, because if we're just going off of that example that Celie gave, like say group of people were just joking around and they're used to it, and it got to the point where now you want to implement your boundary. It probably got to the point where they were comfortable enough to be able to joke around to the to that extent, right? That means you have allowed it to that extent, right? So then in that sense, like being, and it doesn't mean that like, oh, it's too late for you now to implement. Like, no, it's never too late. It just means it's going to be a lot more, probably a little bit more difficult, because now you're going to say, hey, you know what, I get that's how we used to joke around, but you know what, I'm not okay with it. I'm not cool with it no more, and then they're gonna think that you're joking when you do that. You're gonna be like, bro, shut up, like whatever, like you messing with us, like whatever, that's not. And they're probably gonna keep joking around, but you've implemented that boundary. So now you have to keep implementing that boundary every single time, because the moment you're not consistent with implementing that boundary, that's when they're going to come in and they're going to be like, and if they see that inconsistency in how you implement your boundary, they're going to think that you're not serious with it, and then they're not going to take it seriously. So I just wanted to kind of add that with that, is when you are implementing this boundary, as it might be difficult at first, but at the same time, like keep implementing those boundaries until that change does occur.
Okay. Yep. That's good. Good stuff.
So, sorry, we have Lupe in the chat. Some families had different way of how our families are structured and their upbringing. There's some families are an open space, and some have limits to know and understand your boundaries in what role we are in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lupe, for sharing that. Again, the impact of family in the community system. What we are again talking about is finding the balance of boundaries and culture. Oftentimes we think we have a boundary, we have to not include culture. It's not true. Culture, especially with our Pacific Island roots, because culture does not just mean ethnicity. It can mean religion, it can mean your home, it can mean the environment you grew up in, the state you grew up in. All of those things are very, very important to us. It's just a matter of we have to find the balance to where we're not putting that thing always first. There will be some times it'll be first. It just can't be first often or frequently, because oftentimes, again, we tend to lose our ourselves and our identity and not develop ourselves personally. And then a lot of times, it's especially with our Pacific Island or just BIPOC communities, we often give when we're extremely tired or stressed. And Unfortunately, I have seen family members transition from this earth when they were always putting something or someone or the community or family before them because of being extremely tired and stressed. So we're going to talk about guilt. Guilt is definitely something that always happens. We can definitely give some guilt. I'm just saying, it doesn't matter what culture, we often do that. The reason why we talk about guilt, because this is why we tend to allow people to continue to violate our boundaries often. Guilt is often a learned and rooted in feelings of abandonment, and it's a fear of rejection. Abandonment often leads to avoidance. This emotional abandonment happens quite often because a lot of times what's taught to us is like, if I don't do this for someone, I am not loved and they won't love me. That's part of that emotional abandonment. And they were just like, oh, if you love me, you'll do this. We often hear that quite a bit. And we often, if we don't do something, we often got in trouble, and then it was met with whatever kind of consequences it was. And then we feel like we are not loved. So that's when we allow the guilt to take over, whether it's given to us or whether we put it on ourselves. Next, it's a survival pattern taught by our caretakers. It's a generational pattern, and oftentimes it may be used to control and keep you in a place of service. The unfortunate thing is our parents and our caretakers we're only doing what they learn. So often I talk with my clients about how to provide grace for whoever raised them, and also holding them accountable for the behaviors or if trauma was experienced. And then lastly is, you're taught to protect your caretaker's feelings, often at the cost of you. So again, survivalistic thinking trains us to be strong and often self-sacrifice very, very early. And we don't learn how to balance taking care of ourselves internally or externally. And we often learn that someone else is more important than us. And again, what I continue to say, if you take care of yourself first, you're actually better to the family, to the system, to the unit, or whatever you are a part of. Any questions, any comments?
Such good information with this slide. I think with this slide, we also, like, we often talk about this example of, like, let's say, for example, in the cultural context, right? So let's say, for example, my family in Samoa calls me, we have a funeral. We have a Samoan fa'alavelave. We got to give $1,000. And so let's say my boundary is, like, I can't afford to give $1,000 right now, mom and dad, but my boundary, right? Because I'm thinking about my bills and the things that I have to pay here, and then my budget, right? And so let's just say I implement my boundary to my parents in Samoa. I say, mom, dad, I can't afford to give $1,000, but I can afford to give like 400. That's with my budget and everything. Like, I can only give 400, and that's my boundary, right? And so the guilt piece comes in, because if my parents, and let's just clear this, like, my parents are amazing people, they will not give me, but let's say, for example, because this is what it can look like, okay? What this can look like is when our parents, or anybody, doesn't have to be our parents, our family members, our friends, our spouses, any individual in your life can turn around and say, for example, like, $400, that's it? That's all you can give? This person was our dear cousin in the family, and it's gonna make mom and dad look really bad to the family when we give our money, and we do all this. So what is that? That can make me feel guilty. That I can take that, or whatever the response is, and I can feel really, really guilty. And so here's where we see a lot of people come around with that and be like, so now, because I feel guilty, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go to one of those, fast loan places, and I'm gonna go ahead and loan me some money so I can give for this fa'alavelave. So now it's like, oh my God, it's either I go loan some money to give, so now I'm in debt, or guess what? I'm gonna be like, hey, you know what? Well, there goes the electricity bill for this month, and we'll just kind of, stick with ramen noodle for the rest of the month. So I can give the rest of this, money to mom and dad. So now I'm gonna give $1,000 because of my guilt. And guess what? Now I end up with a whole lot more stressors in my life because of that. right? Now I am sitting, now like the family is happy because we got our $1,000 to give, right? But now I'm sitting with like so much guilt, and not on top of guilt, now I'm sitting with like, oh my gosh, like now I'm stressed out because this is literally what Scarlett and I are seeing in our communities that come into therapy. So stressed out to the point of anxiety, to the point of clinical anxiety, clinical depression, thoughts of contemplating suicide because of the many stressors that they are now having to go through because of like not being able to maintain those boundaries, right? So I really wanted to kind of give like a cultural example of what that can look like. That's just an example. Okay, this is just an example, but I hopefully everyone is able to kind of see from a cultural perspective like what that can look like without boundaries, what that can look like if I implement healthy boundaries is I'm just going to go ahead and give. I'm going to go ahead and give like what I am able to give, $400. Yes, my parents are going to be upset with me. I'm going to feel so bummed about that, but you know what? I'm going to be okay because guess what? My bills are getting paid. I'm not going out there and loaning more money to put myself in debt. And I'm going to be okay. So that is an example of like how we can set healthy boundaries in a cultural context. And then how when we are not setting healthy boundaries and what we can end up with. And I would venture to say that a lot of us here today kind of have similar experiences as well when it comes to this.
Yeah, because I think the great thing about it is just like Sala and I are continue to emphasize, you can have boundaries and still honor your culture. You just have to think about what actually works for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, and my family knows when it comes to the Five Love Lovers, I will only give a certain amount. And I even told my family, and they know if I have not met them, it's a no. And they know not to come to me. So if I know them and they will push it. And I'm like, I can only give this. I can only give this. And they know that. So then now when we do family meetings, they were like, well, we know Scarlett's good for this. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah. Because you've been setting that boundary, right? So Scarlett, speak on like when you initially set that boundary. That must have been hard, right?
Oh, they were just like, you are, basically saying I was the black sheep of the family.
Right. Yes.
I don't love, whoever it is. And I'm
Right.
just like, how did that equate to me saying that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And so, and it was because the other thing I had to say to them, I just said, well, when I'm unable to pay a bill, are you going to step in? And they were like, oh, okay. No. I said, okay, so this is all I can give. Yeah. So it's really bringing that reality for what actually works for you. And
Yeah.
I've said before, it's like, I was okay making someone else mad because it didn't mean I loved them less. It was just like, I'm just telling you what works for me. And if that doesn't work for you, there's nothing I in particular can make you can do about that. I'm just telling you what works for me and how I can contribute to what you're asking.
Yes.
So finding that balance for sure.
So not taking away culture. We again, like I said, these are some of the conversations that our community members are experiencing and going through, and it's really getting to that piece where it's like clinically significant for where Scarlett and I are working with them and experiencing all of these different things. So that's why we want to bring this conversation to the forefront and letting our community members know that like, no, we can still keep your culture, but like what Scarlett said, like what's okay with you? What are you okay with? And you have to be, it's going to be difficult at first, but be consistent in implementing that. Celia, you got something?
No. I just saw Lupe had her hand up for a second there. But
Oh yeah, go ahead, Lupe.
Hi. Thank you so much. We're having debating on our side as well. But because that we have Matthias here and they said that's how instructor that's how they said it's instructor how it was passed on. And I'm telling them that's them. Because the ancestor that passed on, and I really like it the way that you two broke it down, because God forgive me for saying, for the ancestors that passed on, they don't they don't choose our brains to be utilized for the next generation. Excuse my language, that's like what I was telling them. But the next generation by generation, that's an empty gap right there. If they don't utilize the knowledge that was given by the forefathers to help structure what needs to, what the lack of the other generation before them and to us, they will say to us that we're abusing the system, but or abuse the anganu, the culture. But what happened to the people? This is the reason why we seek help for ourselves, because they are abusing us and our mental health. Because that they don't treat us level of equality, equal level for everybody else, not by titles. If they can utilize that, and I really like the way that you guys broke down that if you won't do what they said need to do, then you will be ignored and all that. When the bills is coming up, this is America, and I'm sorry, but yeah, we all look at the jobs that people have to provide for their families, and but we're looking inside of their houses, inside their lives growing up. Does the culture, like what you guys mentioned, will the Matais will come and provide all for them? Some will, some don't. That's only if you're a close relationship with them. But it really is driven most of the youth, the younger generation, to no option, not to choose to be in that Matai level, not to choose to learn more for the culture, because there's no room for them the way that was structured by Matais to Matais, elders to elders. If we lose that connection with the generation, yes, we're creating more guilt and more issues to them, for them to grow and then traumatize their mindset because thinking what culture is right, what was structure was right for whatever. But that's the reason for myself is how we structured that, because it's our generation that was holding the power, and because of what we learned from beyond there, our ancestors before us, we've seen and heard enough for what's lack of. And I took that one of our classes that you guys go that we that you guys study more, and you make that choice to be more knowledgeable for what you guys doing right now, like what I said for in our group too. You guys have that key and that power to make that step, to make the generation, the younger ones, to grow up too, to be better than us. But one problem with that we can have, that prideful and the ego that we have, that cannot back down, that cannot back off, and let the generation grow up and know, give them option. Culture is good. Christ life is good. Your choices are good, but you also have to know that there's lack of, and there's a bad or whatever you call it, bad side of it. But you have to be truthful to yourselves for that. And I really like how you guys broke down. Now they're yelling at me. They said I'm taking your side, but I have no choice because I'm one of the living witnesses that seen it. Walk away from culture, but all my brothers are still in their matais and hierarchies, whatever you call it. But like I said, when we all come underneath one roof, we all come by one tummy, one womb that will brought us all together. And the title might be whenever we need it, but we cannot utilize to be the higher level in our families, for us, flesh and blood. But hey, I like that, and I agree for what you guys said for the guilt
Yeah.
and the cultures. I really appreciate that for tonight, and sorry for being late. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lupe. I really appreciate it. So, just so you know, part of what, we always tell our older generation is that what Sala and I are doing is not replacing what has worked for our culture. What we're talking about is adding on to it. Because what worked for the older generation is what worked. But like you said, Lupe, for the newer generation, we have to implement and add on to actually what fits for this generation as well. So with that being said, I know we're short on time, so I'm kind of gonna just keep going. But again, thank you all for sharing. So a reason to think about your culture, again, it helps you understand your family negative relationship patterns and cycles and how this impacts your self-esteem, whether positively or negatively. And when you understand, explore, and accept the roots of who you are, you will develop more self-awareness and you're able to show up for yourself differently. again, a lot of times we have to learn to separate our family negative patterns and actually think about what works for us. Because whatever the positive patterns are, we can continue those, but the negative patterns, we have to learn to separate that. Because again, our caregivers just did our best, and you get to make the choice of breaking the generational pattern. Because again, you have that power of choice. Oftentimes we don't think we have a choice, but if we sit and think about it, we absolutely do. Why is it hard? Because it is. The reason why it's hard because oftentimes we're not taught how to share your feelings healthily, and we're not taught what boundaries are. Like I said earlier, I didn't learn about boundaries till I was almost 30. And I've been in this field for over a decade. So like I said, so it was like when I first started. The other thing is we oftentimes, because somebody has the title of family or friend, they often feel that they can treat us poorly. It's not true. And so one of the first challenges I always give my clients is if you actually remove the title of somebody and actually looked at the quality of the relationship, would you be around them as frequently? And across the board, it's a no. So I just said, okay, how do we balance that? Because again, family members and friends are oftentimes our biggest violators of our boundaries because of they have that title, whatever that title is. Next, again, we're often used to self-sacrificing and being a rescuer, and this impacts our confidence and self-esteem. Again, I always say if you actually take care of yourself, you will be better to this system. We're oftentimes in our collectivistic communities, we're not taught to develop our personal identity. We're often taught to do for the family, because even if I take it to the sports realm, especially for our Pacific Island, we carry the community on our back. And if we feel we don't make it, then we're a failure. And it's just like, okay, and then we talk about actually you're not the rescuer of the whole family. And that's a form of self-sacrificing, often quite a bit. Sala, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, you're good. But I do want to point out that I really love that question that you do ask in there about the one, I think it was a slide before this one. I really like that question. It's always like one of those reflective questions for me, like if this person didn't have the label of the family or friends, like would you still, like that's such a powerful question, and one that deserves much reflection. And it would help to kind of determine the boundary, like removing that label. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love asking that question to clients is because like we often give more credit to the title of somebody rather than looking at the quality of the relationship. So it's just like, and we have to reverse that. It's like, let's look at the quality, because sometimes our family members are detrimental. They just are. And it's just like, do I want to keep hanging around them just because they are family? Or do I want to just hang with them just in certain periods of time that actually makes me feel great? So, all right. So let's get into some tips. So these again are actionable steps that you can start using today, immediately. How you think about yourself matters, period. It just does. So this example is our thought triangle. This is what Sala and I teach with our clients. Everything that you do is always associated with your thoughts. The feelings and behaviors are always associated. They always interact with each other. So if you have a behavior, for example, there's a negative behavior that can be traced back to a thought. Same thing with the feeling as well. So here's an example. I'll give a quick example of like how I went from a negative thought pattern to a positive thought pattern. So the negative thought that I often quite had a bit was I'm not enough. The feelings that were associated with was I felt unworthy, awkward, unhappy, isolated, miserable, and embarrassed. The behaviors that I would do is I would suffer in silence. I didn't reach out for help. I didn't share truthfully, and I cried a lot in isolation. So when I started working on myself and started doing my internal work, I started changing this thought, but by saying like, I deserve good things and I am enough. The feelings I had associated with that is I still felt awkward, but then I felt worthy, warm, beautiful, and grateful. Then the behaviors I associated with that was I started walking more, I started smiling more, and I really truly learned how to celebrate small victories. So again, how you think about yourself is truly important. Sala, anything you wanted to add? Any questions?
Nope, you're good.
Cool. Tip number 2. Simple. Redefine or expand your definition of family and friends to a more personal definition. And what I want to say is, like, we're talking about reducing whatever you learned, because sometimes those definitions don't work. So for example, my definition of friend or family will most likely not be the same as Sala, Celia, or anybody else in this room. So again, we're talking about reducing the societal definition and identifying characteristics or traits and behaviors that are important to you, and identify your limits. So for example, when it comes to identifying characteristics and behaviors, I always tell my clients, think about what trait or character is important to you, and how does that look like in behavior form for you? So for example, if somebody takes something from me, does that mean is that a loving behavior? Does that mean they care for me? So really think about what behaviors make you feel safe. So again, it's thinking about what the characteristics that you want in that definition and what that actually looks like as well. And then our last tip, the power of and. Stop using or, which is literally limits your choices and options, and begin to use the word and, because and is used to remind you of your options, you have permission, and you have choices. So again, because this right here is an indicator of how you can healthily treat yourself. Because a lot of times when we say or, it's just like it has to be one or the other. When I introduce with my clients, we always talk about, well, can it be an and? Can it be all of the above? And they're like, oh, I never thought about it like that. Because again, we often don't think about our choices, give ourselves our options, or give ourselves permission to do so. So for example, this is the power of and at work. So I don't deserve to be treated nicely, and I'm going to learn how to treat myself nicely because I do want to experience niceness. And then lastly, another example is I love my family, and there are times when they hurt me, and I can set healthy boundaries with them. So those are these examples, and that is it for today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I want to thank you all for the conversation. These tend to always be fulfilling, and I appreciate it because I know there's so many questions and stories that folks want to share. So if you have any further questions, please put them in the chat, and Sala and I will answer them via email so that we can address those. And so, Sala, was there anything else that you want? Any other questions or something somebody else said in the chats? And same thing with you, Celie.
Nope, not on my end. Nothing in the chats too. Great job.
Thank you. So Celie's going to be putting in a link for our survey for our classes. Please fill those out because those help us to continue to gain funding for what Sala and I do. And again, we appreciate you all for coming, being a part of this conversation, and please continue to share what we do with others as well. So that being said, I'm going to pass it on over to Celie so he can close us on out.
Yeah, so like what Scarlett said, if you can fill out that form, it takes a little time, but it is super helpful. I put it on the Facebook page, and then also it's here on the Zoom page. But really good topic today. It reminds me of that Bible verse from John chapter 6, verse 60. This is a hard teaching, who can accept it, right? So as we go out there and try to make boundaries, I can literally hear my mom and sister say, "Man, kick them white thoughts somewhere else, buddy." But no, it's good. It'll be good for us in practice to try to implement some of those things. Just a reminder, our last class, Teardrops, is next Tuesday. At the 12th, same time, 6 p.m. We'll send out a reminder. And then also just one quick reminder, this Saturday, we actually are doing a community health fair and tabling information event in Burien. in partnership with Voices of South Pacific and some of our other community navigators. So I'll be down there if folks want to talk a story about mental health in some of the discussions. I'm not an expert, but I can talk. But like I said last time when we met, if you feel like you want to teach this, don't. You can reach out to Sala and Scarlett, but you're always free to talk about it. So I'll be down there if folks want to talk about it. So, but with that, I just want to wish everybody a good night. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Everyone.
Bye. Thank you.